hold up. We need to talk about the absolute madness coming out of ESPN right now. And before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button because I'm bringing you Cowboys coverage every single day and you don't want to miss what's happening in Dallas. So here's what sparked this whole thing. ESPN just floated one of the most ridiculous trade ideas I've ever heard, and somehow it's catching fire with some of our own fan base. And I need to address this before it spreads any further because, honestly, I'm getting heated just thinking about it. The proposal is simple on paper but insane in practice. Trade George Pickens to get Maxx Crosby from the Raiders. And I almost can't believe I just said those words out loud because the level of disrespect to what we finally have on offense is blowing my mind right now. Let me be crystal clear from the jump. Maxx Crosby is an absolute dog. He's one of the best defensive ends in the entire league. He plays every snap like it's his last. He's relentless. He's a game wrecker. And if you asked me would I want him on the Cowboys, hell yes, I would want him on the Cowboys, but not like this, never like this, and definitely not at the cost of George Pickens. And the crazy part is I'm seeing actual Cowboys fans entertaining this idea in the comments and on social media like it makes any sense whatsoever. And I'm sitting here wondering if we've all lost our minds collectively because this is the same fan base that's been screaming for years about getting Dak Prescott another weapon, a legitimate number 2 receiver who can take pressure off CeeDee Lamb and actually make defenses think twice before they double team our best player. We've been begging and pleading with the front office to give us that second threat ever since they shipped Amari Cooper out of town, and you know what happened every single year since then. We watched Dak try to operate with one real option and a bunch of role players. We watched defenses key in on CeeDee and make life miserable for our entire offensive scheme, and we saw it blow up in our faces against every elite defense we faced because when you can take away one guy, you can shut down our whole attack. Think about what happened against San Francisco a few years back. Think about Seattle this past season. Think about any game where a defense had the talent and the coaching to say we're taking CeeDee Lamb away and making someone else beat us. And what happened every single time? We fell apart because there was nobody else who could consistently win, nobody else who could make the plays we desperately needed, and our offense looked completely lost out there. Now, finally, we go out and get George Pickens, a guy who can stretch the field, a guy who can win one-on-one matchups, a guy who brings physicality and playmaking ability that opens up everything else we want to do, and suddenly people want to give him away for a defensive end when we already have one of the better defensive lines in football. But here's what nobody is talking about. If you make this trade, you're not just losing George Pickens, you're completely nuking the entire offensive foundation we just built. You're putting handcuffs right back on CeeDee Lamb. You're forcing Dak into the exact same situation that's failed us over and over again, and you're doing it for a position group that's actually the strongest part of our defense right now. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you watched a Cowboys game this season and thought, man, our defensive line really let us down today, but thank God the secondary held up? Because I can't think of a single game like that, not one. Every single time we got torched, it was the secondary getting cooked. It was coverage breakdowns. It was guys running wide open down the field while our pass rush was actually getting home or at least generating pressure. And now you want to load up even more resources on the one area that's not the problem while you gut the offense and leave the secondary exactly as bad as it was before. The logic doesn't add up no matter how you slice it. And even if you want to argue that Maxx Crosby would make everyone on defense better, which is true to some extent, you'd still need to go out and add 3 or 4 more pieces in the secondary just to make that investment worth anything. So you're not solving the problem. You're just creating a new one on offense while the original problem on defense still exists. And let's talk about the cap situation for a second, because I keep hearing people say we can't afford to keep George Pickens and add defensive help, which is just flat out wrong and shows me some of you aren't paying attention to the numbers. The Cowboys can have well over $90 million in cap space even after signing George Pickens to his extension, and even if you set aside $25 to $30 million for the rookie draft class, you're still sitting on $65 million to play with in free agency. That's enough money to go sign a guy like Trey Hendrickson for $30 million and still have $35 million left over to add multiple pieces in the secondary. So the idea that it's either or is completely false. We can keep George Pickens and we can add premium talent on defense. Both things can be true, but instead we're having this insane conversation about trading away the exact player we've been begging for because some talking head on ESPN needed to fill airtime with a hot take that sounds exciting but makes zero football sense when you actually think it through. And you know what really frustrates me about this whole thing? It's not just the bad logic or the short-term thinking. It's the fact that George Pickens is out here seeing Cowboys fans talk about trading him before he's even played a single snap for us. Like, how do you think that makes him feel when he opens up social media and sees the same fan base that was hyped about his arrival now discussing shipping him out for parts? These players see everything, even if they don't respond to it. They know what the fans are saying. They know what the media is pushing. And when you create this kind of noise around a guy who just got here, you're messing with the chemistry and the trust before it even has a chance to develop. We spent all offseason talking about how much we wanted George Pickens in Dallas, how he was exactly what this offense needed, how he was going to change everything for CeeDee and Dak, and now a few weeks later we're ready to flip him for a defensive end. Like, come on, man, we have to be smarter than this. Would the Raiders even do a straight-up trade of Maxx Crosby for George Pickens? Honestly, I doubt it. They'd probably want picks on top of Pickens because Crosby is that valuable and that established. So you might be looking at giving up our number one receiver addition and draft capital just to move the chess pieces around. And for what? To make our defensive line marginally better while our offense takes a massive step backwards. Let me paint the picture of what our receiving room looks like if we trade George Pickens. You've got CeeDee Lamb as your number one, and that's great. But then your next guy up is Kevontae Turpin, who's a gadget player and a return specialist. He's not a full-time number two receiver. And after that, you're looking at a bunch of unproven guys in camp bodies. So defenses go right back to doubling CeeDee on every play and daring anyone else to beat them. And we're stuck in the exact same cycle of offensive frustration that defined the last few years. Meanwhile, you've got Maxx Crosby on the edge doing his thing, and he's great, but your secondary is still getting roasted because you didn't address the actual problem, and now you're losing games because you can't score enough points to keep up. Does that sound like a winning formula to you? Because it sure doesn't sound like one to me. The whole point of bringing in George Pickens was to fix the offensive imbalance, to give Dak the tools he needs to operate at a high level against any defense, to make sure that when the playoffs come around, we're not one-dimensional and easy to game plan against. And if you trade him away, you're undoing all of that progress in one move. And I get it. Maxx Crosby is fun to think about. He's a star. He's a leader. He plays with insane effort and passion, and having him in a Cowboys uniform would be awesome, but not at this price, not when it means sabotaging the offense we just fixed, and not when we have the cap space to add defensive talent without making this kind of sacrifice. If you told me we could get Maxx Crosby for our first round pick and maybe a veteran defensive piece like Osa Odigizua or someone like that, I'd have a conversation about it. I'd weigh the pros and cons and see if it makes sense. But trading George Pickens is a non-starter. It's a line we can't cross, and I need Cowboys fans to understand that before this narrative gets any more traction. The path forward is obvious. You keep CeeDee, you keep George Pickens, you keep Dak, and you make sure the offensive line can protect them. That's your offensive core, and you don't mess with it. Then you take that $65 million in cap space and you go hunting for defensive backs and edge rushers who can elevate the weakest parts of your roster. You don't rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't create new problems while solving old ones. You just do the work and build a complete team. This isn't rocket science. It's just basic roster construction, and the fact that we're even debating it tells me how much noise is drowning out common sense in the Cowboys community right now. So let me make this as clear as I possibly can. George Pickens is not on the trading block. He shouldn't be on the trading block. And if Jerry Jones and the front office even entertain this kind of proposal, I'm going to lose my mind, because it would signal that we learned absolutely nothing from the last several years of offensive struggles, and we're ready to repeat the same mistakes all over again. Maxx Crosby is a great player, but he's not the answer to our problems, and giving up George Pickens to get him would be one of the worst moves this franchise could make, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. The frustration level with some of these trade ideas is through the roof, because it feels like every time we finally get something right, someone wants to tear it down and start over, and I'm tired of it. Cowboys fans are tired of it, and George Pickens deserves better than to be trade bait before he even steps on the field for us. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you agree with me that this trade is absolute madness, or are you one of the people who thinks giving up Pickens for Crosby makes sense? And if you are in that second camp, I need you to explain your reasoning, because I genuinely don't understand how anyone looks at our roster and thinks that's the move to make. And before you go, if you haven't subscribed yet, do that right now, because I'm covering every single Cowboys move all offseason long, and you're going to want to stay plugged in as we get closer to the season. At the end of the day, this team has the pieces to compete. We have the offensive weapons, we have the cap space to fix the defense, and we have a real chance to make noise if we just stay the course and don't do anything stupid. So let's not trade George Pickens, let's not blow up the offense, and let's focus on actually building a championship roster the right way. Drop your thoughts below, let me know where you stand, and let's have a real conversation about what this team needs to do to get back to contending, because that's what it's all about. How about them Cowboys?